This is the brand new Audi Q8 e-tron 55, the facelifted version of the car previously known as the Audi e-tron. I owned actually one of those cars for about a year and drove it 30,000 kilometers, so I have a lot of experience with that car. So for me, it's very interesting to give you guys my honest opinion of this, and in most aspects, this car has improved. Some aspects, they haven't changed anything, which we're going to dive into, and also they've done some changes which have actually made this car worse. Now let's start this video by talking about the changes to the Q8 e-tron versus the pre-facelifted version called the Audi e-tron. So first off, a new front grille with an optional light bar, which this car has. I'm not sure if I would spend money on it. It looks okay, but it's kind of gimmicky like all the other optional light bars you can get on cars today. New front bumper, which makes the car a little bit more aerodynamic. Few new wheel options and exterior color options. Other than that, the exterior is virtually identical to the pre-facelifted car. Also, you now get of course Q8 badging on the rear deck lid, where before it only said Audi e-tron. On the interior, also pretty much identical except for a new few color options, trim options like this car with red stitching on the accents on the seats, and also with red accents on the seat belts and red stitching on the steering wheel. It's nice, you know, touch, but other than that, the interior is identical to the pre-facelifted version, and there's nothing wrong with that because there's nothing wrong with this interior. Still a very nice, really well built interior with beautiful switchgear, and it feels like a bank vault in here. It's super solid. Yes, there are a few bits and bobs here with cheap touch plastics, but mostly this is a really nice interior. You still have the triple screen layout where you have, you know, a beautiful driver's display in front of the driver. You have also this dual screen setup here in the center console where you have your own dedicated HVAC screen. You know, I prefer the HVAC system in the Q4 e-tron, but if you're going to do a screen, this is the way to do it. Your own dedicated screen with big buttons. You still have physical buttons down here, volume knob, and most importantly, physical controls here in front of the driver. You know, traditional stocks, you have paddles for regen, you have physical buttons on the steering wheel, and also you have the best cruise control stock in the business. So really nice interior, really nice exterior. I think the upgraded front fascia makes this car more attractive than before. But interestingly enough, the car in the graphic here, I didn't see that before now, actually has the old grille and not the new grille. So that is interesting. We're going to talk more about this gauge cluster here because they've also missed an update there that they absolutely should have done. But the biggest difference to this car has to be the updated and upgraded battery pack sizes with improved efficiency. So the old 55 had an 86.5 kilowatt hour battery pack, and this new one has a 106 kilowatt hour battery pack. So the old WLTP rated range of this car was around 420 kilometers. Now it's around 530, so 110 kilometers more. Even the 50, the base version, now gets 453 kilometers of WLTP rated range, which is more than the old 55. Prices are now up, but if you're conservative about the way you spec these cars, it's not necessarily a lot more expensive than the old car. Before I take you guys out on the road and tell you what this is like to drive, and also talk about the biggest change they made to this car, which not necessarily makes this car better. Actually, it makes this car a little bit worse. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But before we do that, I just want to give a huge thanks to today's video sponsor, Zaptic, with their Zaptic Go home charger. The Zaptic Go is a small, cool, and stylish home charger that can charge up to 22 kilowatts on AC charging. It's really nice, really compact. And if you're thinking about, hey, Chris, aren't you a little bit biased here because you're sponsored by them? Yes, I am, but it actually won the independent test of home chargers from the Norwegian Automobile Association called NAF in 2022. So independent testing has shown that this is one of the best chargers on the market. So you don't have to trust me, trust them. But if you want to purchase one, there will be a link in the description box down below. Go scroll down to your country, click that, and purchase one from there. Before we set off, I just want to talk about a few quirks about this car, which are still present with this facelifted version. And I haven't experienced these quirks and the way this functions in any other electric car I've driven in recent history. Not even other Audis like e-tron GT and Q4 e-tron, which I actually tested just a few weeks ago. So that is very fresh in my memory. So you want to set off, right? So you put your foot on the brake and then you put the car into drive, and then you want to drive, and then the car is holding on the parking brake. And if you drive, an internal combustion engine car, especially with a manual handbrake, well, that is completely normal. But in modern cars, these are usually completely automated and seamless, where you're not even feeling the car disengaging the parking brake when you're setting off, or engaging the parking brake when you're parking. And almost every other electric car on the market does that very seamlessly, but in this car, it doesn't. This is a very weird quirk about the old car that they haven't changed with this car. And the fact that other Audis don't do this is just a little bit confusing when hopping in between these Audis. So you have to turn off the parking brake. It's not a big issue, but it's a very weird thing. And then you start to drive, and then the car just creeps and rolls. So, it doesn't creep. It just rolls, is what I was going to say. No creep function. So you stop, you put on the parking brake, the handbrake. Oh, now it auto engages the parking brake, which is really weird, but most times it doesn't. So the car's like lurching forward like that, and then it's like an automatic transmission, like a torque converter, where it just like bounces on the transmission in gear. Really weird sensation. I haven't experienced that in other cars. Another thing is that this car still hasn't gotten a battery percentage readout here next to the manual indicator. So you can make the screen bigger. It shows I have less than 75%, but more than 50%. I would guess maybe around 70, but it doesn't show you that, even though it shows that in the Q4 e-tron. So you still have to go into a menu here, and then to another menu, and then to a sub menu to just read out your battery percentage. So 63%. So I was quite way off. So that's just like a weird quirk. Like, why didn't they update that? When they updated the motors, they updated the styling and the battery, but they didn't do a simple software update just to give us a readout. And this screen is a lot bigger than what you find in the Audi Q4 e-tron, so it's just really weird. But setting off, you also, to deactivate the lane keep assist, you just hold the button on the outer side of the stock, which is really nice. I talked about this, ergonomics of these Audis being the best in the business masterclass. So if you want to see all of that in detail, go and check out my Audi Q4 e-tron review. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm filming this again because I had audio issues. I filmed this whole review and then no audio. So I'm filming this again with the charger connected to my wireless mic there on the camera. So this car is still very comfortable, very quiet, very spacious. Front cabin is spacious, rear cabin is spacious, the trunk is big, you have a really nice driving position, still standard air suspension. This car on 22-inch wheels may hamper the ride a little bit, but I don't think it makes a huge difference. But what I immediately noticed while hopping into this car from my private vehicle, now my current private vehicle, which is a Person Taycan Cross Turismo, is that it's a lot stiffer in the dampening and the suspension tuning than I remember it being. And I hopped out of my Porsche, which is on 21-inch wheels. This is on 22-inch wheels, but still, I think that Porsche should be a little bit stiffer than this to drive just out of the box. So I was immediately rang up a friend of mine who's just purchased a used e-tron, like a 2-year-old one or something like that, the old model on 21-inch wheels. And I'm like, can we do a back-to-back where we drive this car and then we drive your car? We both drive the cars and then we give our opinions. And we both concluded that the old car is probably about 20 to 25% softer in the suspension tuning than this new updated facelift version. So over that bump there, it's still comfortable. It's still an air suspension. I don't think 21 to 22-inch wheels makes a huge difference. Maybe if we went down to 20-inch wheels, getting a little bit more rubber, it would be a little bit more soft. But from my experience and from what I can feel, it's the actual suspension tuning. It's not, because it's not the, from, if you're riding on, low profile tires and big wheels, what you can feel is juddering through the wheel, the tire, the suspension, and then into the chassis. And then sharp bumps, you're going to feel that. This is not like that. Sharp bumps are still really nicely damped, but it's just the big bumps where it's not as floaty, not as, comfortable or luxurious as the old car. But on a road like this, which is a twisty, turny road, it is really, really an improvement over the old car, where the old car just feels a little bit boat-like and wallowy. This is a lot more sporty. It feels a lot lighter on its feet, and the steering it also has been improved. Like, we drove these cars back to back, and like the old steering is a little bit, dead around center, a little bit soft. This is a lot sharper. Still no feel. It's still Audi steering, but it's just makes the car so much more fun to drive and sporty and more agile. And when you think about this now being called the Q8 e-tron, it's more defined in the range, because before we got the e-tron and then we got the Q4, and it's like, how do these cars compare? And the fact that they're coming out with an Audi Q6 e-tron, which will be bigger than this but cheaper than this, the whole thing makes a lot more sense. So think about it like this. The Q4 e-tron is kind of like the Audi Q5. The upcoming Q6 e-tron is going to be like the Audi Q7, bigger, more luxurious. And then this Q8 e-tron is more like the Audi Q8, which is like a sporty version of the Q7. Then it makes a lot more sense, making it stiffer, making it more sporty. I still think they, did it a little bit too much. I think they could have, just given the car a little bit softer suspension tuning, especially in, in comfort mode. Put this car into dynamic mode is actually quite impressive to drive. But I think, people looking to upgrade their e-tron, maybe they have a 4-year-old one, 3-year-old one. That car came out in 2019. That's 4 years ago. So a lot of those cars are coming off lease and people want to upgrade. I think you're going to be a little bit disappointed and surprised that this car is so much more stiff to drive. By no means uncomfortable, but in a big SUV like this, I just prefer to be a little bit more wallowy. It's not a long time ago since I drove the Mercedes EQS SUV, and compared to this car is a lot stiffer and that car is a lot softer. They're on like opposite sides of the scale, and it's quite interesting because I really think there is cross-shopping. Yes, that car is bigger and more expensive, but when you start speccing this out, you're getting into like a low-spec EQS SUV territory. And I think that's a bit interesting that there's this big difference in the way these two car rides. But yeah. As I said, this is actually the second time I'm filming this whole video because of audio issues. So this is my second conclusion of the day, and it's basically identical to my first conclusion. And that is, this is still a really good electric luxury SUV, and these upgrades with this facelift are much needed and improves an already very good car. The upgraded battery, better range, and all of that makes this car more competitive. And on paper, it seems like it's lagging a little bit behind the competition, but don't be too fooled, because my range tests have shown that this car actually is closer to its WLTP rated range than most cars. I mean, it got like 80% of its WLTP rated range, where a lot of cars get between 60 and 70%. And this car got almost 400 kilometers of range at 120 kilometers an hour or 75 miles per hour. And that is super impressive because, according to its WLTP rated range, if we look at other cars, it should have gotten a lot less. Like the Neo EL7 I tested last week got like 65 kilometers almost of less range than this car, even though on paper it only has about 20 kilometers less range than this car. So don't be too fooled. And talking about that car, that's a very interesting review, because that shows you that you can throw all the bells and whistles at a car, all the performance, but if you don't get the fundamentals right, it doesn't matter how much equipment you have, how much standard equipment you have. And that car, yes, great value, but this car actually, you can get into one of these at the same price as a car like that with less equipment, but still like essentials like the great Bang & Olufsen sound system. You can get the electric seats, you can get, 360 camera, you can get, windows that are double pane, standard air suspension. You can get a really nice spec one of these cars for around the same price as the old 55 that I had. And considering much bigger battery pack, better range, and just improvement in driving dynamics, that is not a bad deal at all. So this shows you that, I would rather buy a low spec one of these than a highly spec competitor that just doesn't get the fundamentals right. Because ergonomics, there's nothing annoying about this car except for the niggles about, the drivetrain with park and drive. But that is just like a tiny thing compared to other annoying cars. So guys, let me know what you think down below. I still really like this car. I've been speccing these out, so I don't know, maybe in the future we'll see. But let me know what you think down below. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below, and for more car content, as always, please subscribe. See you guys later, and goodbye.